Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. So the first image that I have is, I don't look at them beforehand. So that the reaction is very kind of raw, right? So in this case, it's called Silver Spring.
Right.
Okay, so it's a landscape photo of, on the absolute right of the frame is a road with no shoulder or anything. And it looks like very thin pavement. And then there's like a kind of a ditch. And it's fall, winter, but more fall. And then it leads to what is probably a stream, but it could be a lake, a small lake. The trees are all naked of their leaves. It's a gray day. Probably, it's hard to tell because it's overcast, so hard to know where the light is coming from. I would guess it's morning. Probably not yet hitting below, I speak in metric, so below zero, which in Fahrenheit is what, like 40 degrees?
32.
32. Yes. I'm learning already. 32. Okay. So, so why this image? What is this?
Well, I write a lot about sustainability, and the history of sustainability is built around the environmental movement. And the environmental movement itself has its roots in a little bit of romanticism around nature. So if you think about the Hudson Valley School of Art, which showed these grand views of nature with humans observing it, or if you think about Ansel Adams, a lot of Ansel Adams photographs were these beautiful images of nature. And I've traveled quite a lot around the world. And if you just take an Ansel Adams photo and just turn a little bit, you would have seen the impact of human activity. But he chose never to show it. He always showed nature as glorified. And all of my work throughout my life has been around showing nature as it really is, as impacted by humans. And that's why I picked this photo, because I feel like it is a little reminiscent of Ansel Adams or of the Hudson Valley School of Art, in that it has that kind of glorious image of nature, but it's also an ordinary image of nature that shows the imprint of humans on it.
Right.
When I was studying geology, when I was actually working as a geologist, one of the first things that I saw as a professional geologist as I was going out and doing my work is that it was really hard to do my work because the landscape was so altered. And I would go back to the office and say, it's hard to map the superficial features as natural because it's not natural. And I was working with geochemistry, and so finding natural was really important. And no one was really writing about this at the time. And I used to go to the Geological Society annual meeting, and there would be a handful of papers given around human impacts on the environment. And today, I would say almost the majority of them, when you go to the Geological Society of America annual meeting, are on human impacts. And so just in a short amount of time, the field has really transformed. And to me, that's what this image represents. It represents a space that is altered.
Well, here's how I'm going to connect to what you say, okay? This isn't an interview. It's a conversation. So I may not even ask a question, but I may talk for a while. So interesting that you anchor or reference Ansel Adams, because Ansel Adams is the grandpappy of exquisite imagery. And of the landscape. And I grew up eating that stuff, really enjoying and appreciating it. And then the words come out of your mouth, I was studying geology, working as a geologist, and I'm literally hopping on my chair, eating the words that you're saying, because I'm like, yes. And here's what's interesting to me is that a person can look, aesthetically speaking, at an Ansel Adams photo and really get that high impact impression. But now, with that as a kind of the basic or the context that you've just sort of set out, when I look at this image, it kind of clearly gives the sense, you clearly have an understanding of art and design and aesthetics and the beauty of nature and landscape. But the image itself is quite beautiful, even though it's remarkably banal. It's basically a sort of road, backcountry road probably to somebody's backyard or something. You could see a couple of cars. It's gray. You could just see hints of color in the brown grass. And yet there's this kind of quiet solitude. And so that's what you're evoking, which I know you've thought about. So this is a very conscious creation. So how does this fit into your work?
Well, the other aspect of it is, I do a lot of editing around sustainability. And what I mean by that is that I produce a number of books where I invite people to write chapters or give ideas. And so I have a few of those out. I'm working on one right now. I'm working on one that is about 200 chapters around defining sustainability. Yeah, it's really a fun.
That's a monster.
It is a monster. It's coming out with Palgrave Macmillan. It's soon. It's actually being published as it goes along.
Okay.
And in doing so, I feel a little bit like, I don't know if you know William Cullen Bryant, who was an editor back in the 19th century, who did things like Picturesque America, and he did Collier's and several other things. And so what I mean by that is I feel like I'm helping to define the field. And I think it's important to have a particular viewpoint when you go into those kinds of things.
Okay.
And I think that this picture kind of represents my thinking around sustainability right now, is that we can't put nature back. I think a lot of people want nature. If you look, the Ansel Adams kind of represents a fetishized view of nature.
Okay.
In many ways, it's nature without people.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, it's hard to do that with the billions of people we have on the planet.
Agreed.
We just can't. And so how do we create beauty? How do we create a reality? How do we create a livable world in harmony with nature with the cards that we're dealt right now?
Right.
And in some ways, there's a little bit of grieving that goes along with that. People have talked a lot about the grief that comes with knowing sustainability, knowing extinction, knowing what climate change does. I know you work a lot on sharks and shark issues. So the grief around what's happening with our ocean ecosystems. Now we can work to change it. We can work to make things better, but it won't be what it was.
No.
And I think that this picture evokes a little bit of that.
Yes. I mean, it's if you let yourself feel, and there's definitely, because you're American, and part of your mythology, for example, is this idea of Thoreau separating himself for some kind of solitude in this pristine natural space. But the road is right there.
Exactly.
There's a road, there's a car, it's beautiful and bleak. Wow, I had no idea this is going to be our conversation.
But it's true, though. I think that's important that we accept it and understand it.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people who work on environmental issues want to go back to a particular point. Like, what is the right point we're at to get to?
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that. And I think we have to recognize that there is change, there is adaptation that is going on around us in nature. And we're part of that adaptation.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Shall we move on to the next photo?
Sure.
Okay. I am loving this. Awesome. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.